Here's what happened across the U.S. in the past hour, all in 60 seconds. House Democrats' support for articles of impeachment against Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem surged after the Minneapolis shooting. The resolution had about 140 Democratic co-sponsors as of Monday afternoon and could force a vote next week. The White House said Trump is distancing himself from claims by some DHS officials who labeled Alex Priddy a domestic terrorist without evidence. Trump said border czar Tom Homan will meet with Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey on Tuesday. On Monday, Senator Ted Cruz and Representative Michael McCaul called for an investigation after a Border Patrol agent fatally shot ICU nurse Alex Priddy in Minneapolis. Minnesota officials say a state-led probe is already underway. A private business jet tied to the address of Houston law firm Arnold & Idkin crashed on takeoff in Bangor, Maine, killing 6 people Sunday night. The NTSB is investigating, and officials said the plane suffered a post-crash fire. President Trump said the U.S. will raise tariffs on imports from South Korea from 15% to 25% after Seoul's legislature hasn't approved a prior deal. He also said higher levies will hit South Korean autos, lumber, and pharmaceuticals. Senate Democrats said they will block a DHS funding bill that includes billions for ICE after the fatal shooting of Alex Priddy in Minneapolis, with funding expiring January 30. The standoff increases the risk of a partial shutdown. Former Portland trailblazer Chris Dudley announced on Monday that he's entering the Republican primary for Oregon governor. The 2010 GOP nominee is launching another run 16 years after narrowly losing statewide. Border Patrol Chief Greg Bovino and some federal agents will begin leaving Minnesota on Tuesday. Governor Tim Walz and Mayor Jacob Frey said. The shift follows Trump's call with Walz and his decision to send Tom Homan to Minnesota. Here's what happened across the U.S. in the past hour, all in 60 seconds. NATO Chief Mark Rutte told EU lawmakers Europe cannot defend itself without U.S. military support. He urged allies to boost spending and warned that pursuing independence from Washington would be far costlier than current targets. Senate Democrats said they won't back a DHS funding bill without major reforms after the Minnesota shootings involving federal immigration agents. With funding due by Friday, lawmakers warn a partial shutdown is increasingly likely. A new Reuters Charts Ipsos poll found Trump's approval on immigration fell to a record low, with 39% approving and 53% disapproving. The drop follows backlash to the crackdown and deadly confrontations in Minneapolis. The White House said Tom Homan will travel to Minnesota to oversee ICE operations and report directly to President Trump after the killing of ICU nurse Alex Priddy. Officials said multiple federal reviews are underway. Trump told Axios he believes Iran wants a deal as a large U.S. naval force arrives in the region. He said he delayed ordering strikes after Iran's crackdown on protests, but an attack remains an option. Attorney General Pam Bondi demanded access to Minnesota's voter rolls after the Minneapolis shooting, linking the request to the administration's immigration enforcement push. State officials and voting rights groups said the demand is intrusive. A U.S. official said more than 25 countries have joined Trump's Board of Peace, with its first focus on Gaza. The effort is expected to coordinate international backing for post-war security and governance steps. President Trump reshuffled oversight of the Minnesota immigration operation on Monday, sending border czar Tom Homan to Minneapolis to manage on-the-ground enforcement. The move follows a second fatal agent-involved shooting and mounting bipartisan backlash. Here's what happened across the U.S. in the past hour, all in 60 seconds. A federal judge in Minneapolis heard arguments over Minnesota's bid to temporarily halt Operation Metro Surge, the Trump administration's immigration deployment. The judge delayed a decision and ordered further filings from both sides. Winter Storm Fern brought heavy snow and damaging ice across multiple states, and the Weather Channel reported at least 7 storm-related deaths. Utilities worked to restore widespread outages as airlines canceled thousands of flights. China said its trade talks with Canada are not aimed at any third country after Trump threatened steep tariffs on Ottawa. The dispute adds tension ahead of U.S.-Canada negotiations on trade and EV policy. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey said Border Patrol Chief Greg Bovino and some agents will begin leaving Tuesday. Officials said Trump agreed to de-escalate and cooperate with a state investigation. Trump said Iran appears ready to negotiate as the U.S. moved an aircraft carrier and other ships into the region. He said he delayed ordering strikes, but military options remain on the table. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte told EU lawmakers Europe cannot defend itself without U.S. support. He urged higher spending and said true strategic independence would require far larger budgets and a nuclear deterrent. On Monday, Senator Ted Cruz and Representative Michael McCaul urged an investigation into the Minneapolis shooting of ICU nurse Alex Priddy by Border Patrol agents. Others called for more enforcement. President Trump said the U.S. will raise tariffs on South Korean imports from 15% to 25% after Seoul's legislature delayed approving a trade deal. The move targets autos, lumber, and pharmaceuticals. Senate Democrats said they will oppose a DHS funding bill unless ICE operations are overhauled after the Minneapolis shootings. With funding expiring Friday, leaders warned a partial shutdown is possible. Attorney General Pam Bondi demanded access to Minnesota's voter rolls and public assistance data after the Minneapolis shooting. State election officials rejected the request, saying the governor doesn't control the records and litigation is ongoing.